The unknown number that calls me every night. It started as a simple annoyance. Just another wrong number, another spam call I could ignore. But it didn't stop. Every night, at exactly 3:12 a.m., my phone would ring, always from the same unknown number. And no matter what I did, blocking it, turning off my phone, switching numbers, the calls never stopped. The first call. The first time it happened, I was barely awake. I remember glancing at my phone, my vision blurry from sleep. The screen glowed in the darkness, displaying those two words I would come to fear, unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my half-dreaming state made me swipe to answer. There was nothing, no background noise, no static, just silence. I muttered a curse, hung up, and rolled over thinking it was just a glitch. I was wrong. A pattern emerges. The next night, the call came again. 3:12 a.m., same number, same eerie silence. I stayed on the line longer, listening, waiting, and then a whisper, faint, indistinct, like someone was just barely breathing into the receiver. "Who is this?" I demanded, my heart pounding. No answer. But right before the call ended, I swore I heard something, a voice, just barely audible. A single word, soon. I didn't sleep after that, the growing fear. The calls kept coming, every night, always at 3:12 a.m. Each time the whisper grew clearer, soon, getting closer, almost there. By the fifth night, I stopped answering, but the calls still came. And then, they started leaving voicemails. The voicemails. The first message was only breathing, deep, slow, unnatural. The second was laughter. Not the kind of laughter you hear in a joke. It was slow, hollow, wrong. By the seventh night, the messages changed. Now it was a voice, my voice. "Help me," it whispered. "Please, help me." I played it over and over, trying to make sense of it. I had never recorded anything like that. But the voice on the message was definitely mine. A dark connection. I tried everything, resetting my phone, changing SIM cards, even getting a whole new device. But no matter what I did, the calls continued. And then something terrifying happened. One night, instead of unknown number, the caller ID displayed a location, my address. The call was coming from my own house. The visitor in the dark, I sat frozen, staring at the screen. Then, slowly, I turned my head and saw something standing in the doorway of my bedroom. A figure, tall, shadowed, motionless. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then the phone in my hand buzzed. A new message. With trembling hands, I opened it. It was a photo, a picture of me, lying in bed, taken from the doorway, exactly where the figure was standing. I dropped my phone and lunged for the light switch. But when the room flooded with light, the figure was gone. And my phone was ringing again. A familiar voice. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But the next day, I went to the police. They checked my call history, ran a trace. But here's the thing. There were no records of the calls. No missed calls, no voicemails, no pictures in my gallery. It was like none of it had ever happened. Except I knew it had. And it wasn't over. Because that night at 3:12 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, I answered. I put the phone to my ear, and I heard my own voice on the other end. "It's me," the voice whispered. "I need to tell you something." "What do you want?" I asked. A pause. Then, "You have to remember." "Remember what?" Static crackled. Then the voice, "The accident." My blood turned to ice, because suddenly I did remember. The forgotten accident. 1 year ago, I was in a car crash. I was driving home late at night when a truck ran a red light and slammed into me. I should have died, but somehow I survived. Or at least, that's what I had always believed. But as I sat there, listening to my own voice whisper through the phone, a horrible thought crept into my mind. What if I didn't survive? What if I was never supposed to leave that accident? And what if the calls were trying to tell me that? The final call. The next night, the call came again, 3:12 a.m. I answered. "Am I dead?" I asked. A long silence. Then, "Not yet." I swallowed hard. "Then what are you?" The voice on the other end shifted, warped. Then it spoke, and the words made my blood run cold. "I'm the one who was supposed to take your place." The line went dead. And the next morning, for the first time in weeks, my phone never rang again. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I can still hear it vibrating, waiting. Voices Under My Floorboards. I bought the house because it was cheap. That should have been my first red flag. A two-story Victorian home tucked away in a quiet town, selling for nearly half of what it was worth. It sounded too good to be true. And as it turns out, it was. Moving in. The day I moved in, the place felt off. Not haunted. At least not in the way movies make you think. There were no flickering lights, no sudden cold spots, but the silence inside the house was wrong. It felt thick, like the walls were holding their breath, like something was listening. But I chalked it up to nerves and went about unpacking. And for the first few nights, nothing happened. Not until I heard the first whisper. The first night of whispers. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure why. Then, I heard it. A soft murmuring. Faint, just beneath the floor. I sat up, holding my breath. Was it the pipes? The house settling? But as I listened closer, I realized the sound wasn't random. It was voices, and they were speaking words. I couldn't make them out, but they were definitely there. A hushed, eerie chanting from somewhere underneath me. I told myself it was my imagination, pulled the covers over my head, and forced myself to sleep. The next day I laughed it off, until it happened again, growing louder. Every night the voices came, and each time, they grew louder. What was once a whisper became a murmur. Then a conversation. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, urgent, angry, desperate, and then, one night, they said my name. They know me. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. Did I imagine that? But then, clear as day from beneath the floorboards, a raspy voice hissed, "He doesn't belong here." I leaped out of bed, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "Who's there?" I demanded. Silence. Then a slow, dragging sound, like fingernails scraping wood. I backed out of the room, my skin crawling. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after that, because now, the voices weren't just talking, they were moving. Something beneath me. I started hearing the sounds all over the house, not just under my bedroom floor, but in the hallway, the kitchen, even the bathroom. And then, one night, as I stood frozen in my bedroom, the floorboards beneath me began to bend, like something was pressing up against them from below. I ran. I packed a bag and drove to a motel, my hands shaking the whole way. But even there, I couldn't sleep, because I knew the house was waiting for me, digging for answers. The next morning, I called the realtor, demanded answers. At first, she was hesitant. Then, with a sigh, she told me the truth. "Your house has a history. A family lived there in the 1950s, parents and a son. One night, the boy vanished. The parents claimed he ran away, but the neighbors didn't believe it. They heard screaming. And then, silence. The parents moved away soon after, and the house sat vacant for decades. That is, until someone found the boy's body, buried beneath the floorboards. The truth beneath my feet. I returned home, a sick feeling in my stomach. I had to know. So that night, armed with a crowbar, I pried open the floorboards in my bedroom. And underneath, I found a small, dark space. The smell of rot hit me like a punch. And there, in the shadows, were bones, small, fragile, and next to them, fingernail scratches on the wood, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. My stomach lurched. I staggered backward, and the voices erupted, not whispers, not murmurs, but screams. A deafening chorus of agony, and in the center of it all, one voice cut through, a child's voice. "You found me." Not alone, I ran. I fled the house, never looking back. I called the police, told them what I found. They investigated, confirmed everything. But even after they removed the remains, the house wouldn't sell. People who entered said they felt watched, that they heard whispers at night. And sometimes, if you listen closely, you can still hear the child's voice. Waiting. The room that smells like death. I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped inside. It was an old house, a fixer-upper that I got for an unbelievable price. The real estate agent called it a steal. But the moment I walked in, the air changed. It was thick, heavy, rotten, like something was decaying inside the walls. And the worst part? The smell only came from one room, a smell that won't leave. I thought maybe an animal had died in the vents. That would have been the logical answer, right? But no matter what I did, air fresheners, candles, even deep cleaning, the stench wouldn't leave. It wasn't just the smell, though. Every time I stepped into that room, my chest tightened. My skin prickled with an overwhelming sense of dread, like I was standing in someone's grave. The history of the house. After a few nights of uneasy sleep, I started digging into the house's past. Turns out, I wasn't the first person to notice the smell. The last owner, he only lasted 6 months. The one before that, 3 months. And the owner before that, he disappeared. They found his car in the driveway, his wallet and keys on the kitchen counter. But no trace of him. It was like he had just vanished into thin air. A horrible discovery. That was enough for me. I called a professional cleaning crew, hoping they could find the source of the smell. But when they ripped up the carpet, their faces turned pale. Because underneath, there was a stain, a massive, dark stain soaked deep into the wooden floorboards. And the smell? It hit us all at once. Rot, blood, something else, something worse. One of the workers gagged, another backed away, shaking his head. But I just stood there, staring at the floor, my pulse pounding in my ears. That's when I saw it. Something was carved into the wood beneath the stain. One word scratched over and over again: help. The night everything changed. I should have left that night, but I didn't. I told myself it was just a stain. I told myself it was just a bad smell, and so, like an idiot, I stayed. And that's when the whispering began. At first, it was faint. So quiet I thought it was the wind, but as the hours passed, it grew louder, until I could hear it clearly. Get out. I turned on every light in the house. My hands were shaking. Then, bang! The door to the rotting room slammed shut. Hard, like something was inside, something that didn't want me there. The body in the walls, I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police. But then, I saw it. A shadow under the door. Something moving inside the room. And then, a low, wet breathing sound. My blood turned to ice. I should have run, but instead, I pushed the door open. And what I saw, I will never forget. The stain on the floor was spreading. Dark, thick liquid seeped up from the wood, dripping into the air. And standing in the middle of the room was a figure, not a person, not a ghost. Something wrong. Its flesh was gray, sunken, rotting. Its eyes were nothing but black pits. And its mouth, it stretched open in a silent, endless scream. Then it pointed at the wall and whispered, "Help me." Digging into the walls. The next morning I called the police, told them everything. Of course, they didn't believe me, not until they tore down the wall. And inside they found bones. Buried inside the walls. The missing owner, he never left. They had sealed him inside alive, and the worst part? The body was still fresh, as if he had never truly died, as if the house had kept him. The house still stands. The police ruled it an unsolved crime. I packed my things and left that night, but the house, it still stands, still waiting. And if you ever go inside, you'll smell it. That foul, rotting stench, the smell of something trapped, the smell of something still alive, the smell of death.